Hello, I'm Screwwave, and I'm the author and artist of the webtoon Visions Beyond Sleep. I wanted to make this video to show you my process of how I make a webtoon from conceptualizing to uploading a chapter. I don't want to waste any time, so let's jump right in. Concept. The first and main part of creating a webtoon is having a concept in mind. Do you want a fantasy type webtoon where it's set in a faraway land with a really high and complex magic system, or do you want something more modern and grounded in real life? I personally struggled with this, since the characters I wanted to create my story around were high school characters but also had a really high fantasy magic system. What helped me with nailing down the concept was reading other webtoons and other manga that I felt inspired by. I felt as if the more complex my webtoon plot was, the more I wouldn't want to explore that story. So I made my story a slice of life romance with some magic elements. Also editing Screwwave here just to say I was looking through Procreate at old Visions Beyond Sleep art, and some of these characters don't even exist. Miyuki does not exist. Toki does not exist. Sometimes you have to cut out some characters completely so you can have a satisfying story, and honestly I feel like my story is much better without those characters. Sorry, rest in peace, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices. And honestly, Toki turned into Leah, so hashtag trans femme rights, I don't know. So now let's talk about scripting. Before I even open my drawing app, I want a solid idea of what's happening in each chapter. That means knowing the basic flow of scenes and the purpose behind them, and what I'm trying to reveal about the story or the characters. For this chapter, I know it's going to open with the characters having lunch together and talking about Haruta's past. Because Haruta's new to the school, I can use this moment to give readers a little bit of a backstory, without it feeling like a huge info dump. I want it to feel natural, like they're discovering things about each other, rather than me just telling the reader everything. When scripting, I'll include notes on the character's actions, facial expressions, or body language. Little details like this help me stay consistent with each character's personality and emotions, and it makes the drawing easier when I know exactly what everyone should look like or enact in each scene. To keep my dialogue easy to spot, I highlight it in bold so I can quickly find what each character is saying while I'm working on my sketches. Also, there's no one way to script. You can script any way you like. This is just the way I prefer it and the way it's easiest for me. Once the script is ready, it's time to start sketching. I use Procreate on my iPad since I'm often on the go, either at school or at work. For the canvas, I use a 1600 by 12,000 pixel panel. This size works well for webtoons, it gives me enough space, and also I can resize it in Clip Studio later. The first thing I do when I open Procreate is make a layer with a layer assist that's set to drawing assist so it has the grid. This helps me make perfect squares so I can go into Clip Studio after sketching and make perfect panels. When doing my sketching process, you can see that my sketches aren't really rough, it's more like line art. This is just because I go straight from sketching into line art and I want to make sure my lines are clean so the line art process doesn't take forever, because line art is the most complex and time-consuming part of making a webtoon. So having a clean sketch makes sure I can produce a webtoon page faster. Also for posing, I use online references and I also use 3D models for tricky poses. So I would go into Clip Studio and make a 3D model and pose it on my background, and then draw over it. Speaking of background, I got my background from Acon 3D. It's a full school background. It also includes a teacher's lounge, a gym, all of that stuff, and it's around $50. I know this is pretty expensive for a casual webtoon artist, but honestly, this is so much better than drawing backgrounds. My first chapter, all of the backgrounds were drawn, and it took forever for the first chapter to come out. Having this school background, especially since they're students and will be in school all the time, just having this is so much easier than drawing a background. Acon 3D also has some great everyday deals, so I like to check every day. They usually have some 3D models and backgrounds for 90–80% off, and that makes them $1 to $2, so that's some cheap stuff if you're looking to make a webtoon as well. So I take the 3D model from Acon 3D and put it into a program called Snaptoon so I can fly around and angle my background. I can also adjust the skylight color, the lighting, if it's day or night, if it's snowing, if it's raining, all that stuff. You can also adjust the focus, so if you want the background to be blurry, if you want it to be in kind of like a half-tone gray style, there's so much customization in Snaptoon. So with sketching out of the way, let's go into Clip Studio and set up our canvas. The first thing I do when I open Clip Studio is make a new canvas that is 1600 by 12,000 pixels, and I set the DPI a little bit higher so my drawings can be a little bit more high definition. Then I import the sketch from Procreate and resize it so it fits the whole canvas on Clip Studio. The next thing I do is take the paneling tool and outline each panel that's on my canvas. Using this tool instead of just a regular square outline helps keep all of the art inside the box. It also makes separate folders for each panel, so you can open up the folder and just add your line art, your flat colors, and your background in there. And then after that, I start doing my line art. I usually just put the sketch on the bottom layer and set it to a lower opacity so I can just draw over the drawing. I keep the pen size relatively small for further back panels, and close-up panels I use a bigger brush size. After that, I kind of just go with the flow. I mean, I didn't really have a tutorial on how to make a webtoon when I first started, so I kind of just made my process from the ground up. It's good to have character references with you. I don't. I really need to make like a color outline for each character, but yeah, I mean, I usually switch back and forth from each panel, from past panels, and kind of just color pick the colors from there, which I do not recommend. Do not take that from me. Make a canvas with all of the flat colors outlined for each character. I'm actually going to do that very soon. So instead of switching back and forth, you can just color pick the colors from that one canvas and just do your flat colors and your shading in there. For backgrounds, like I said earlier, you could also use the Acon 3D backgrounds, but you can also draw your own backgrounds. It's good to read manga and watch anime and look at other webtoons and see what they do for comedic panels, what they do for sad panels, what they do for when the character's mad, what they do for when the character is depressed or something. And there are like graphics you can use and backgrounds that are in the Clip Studio kind of store, but also it's just good to see some simple backgrounds you can use. Sometimes people just use one color, or they use one color with kind of like a circle underneath, which you'll see me doing later. But not every panel needs a background. That's something I struggled with in the first chapter. I thought every panel needed a background, and I really wanted to set the scene for where we are in the comic, but not every scene needs a background. Also, not every scene needs to be super detailed. You might think if I'm drawing a school, there has to be characters in every single scene in the background. And I kind of cheat, I kind of make silhouettes of the characters, because if you have characters that are extremely detailed in one panel together, it gets kind of messy. So it's good just to have like an outline of like a character in a background or silhouette. Or sometimes there's brushes that are kind of like crowd brushes, and they're just brushes of people like standing and walking. So that's good to have in the background if you need to fill a scene. Because if my character were to be standing in a crowd full of people, I want her to stand out and not have the reader be distracted by another character design. Which, it's good to have good background character design, especially like looking at like old cartoons that I used to watch, like My Little Pony. People used to love the background character designs of My Little Pony characters. Like some iconic ones are like Lyra, Bon Bon, Derpy, Dr. Hooves. Like people named them and kind of just had like little backstories for them. So if you're looking to like have some detailed background characters, I would say just develop some. If you want to have some background characters that kind of pop into the comic once or twice, have a speaking part, because people will be like, oh, I recognize them from chapter 2 or whatever. I also like to ask my friends if I can put their OCs in my comic. So I have them cameo in the background, and I kind of develop like if they're in a club, if they dress like this, if they hang out with these type of people. I also cameo real life people, so I put myself in the background, I put my boyfriend in the background. It's just good to have some cool character designs that people can look at. So throughout this process, sorry for me rambling, but you've probably seen that my shading is really simple compared to like fully rendered webcomics. It's because I want to be able to produce chapters faster, and having a simple shading style helps me with that. I know I haven't been able to produce chapters fast because I work 2 jobs and I'm a full-time student, so having the shading style kind of makes it easier, I guess. I also don't want to overcomplicate things. I want my comic to look simple, and I want it to be easy on the eyes and not really crazy. I also like to add like effects and little sound effects, as you can see, and I'll go into typography right now. So the first rule of typography and making speech bubbles is not making the speech bubbles super big. I often see in other webtoons and webtoons on Webtoon Canvas, the speech bubbles and text are huge and it takes up most of the panel. You want a focus on your art. You know you want the readers to read what they're saying, but you also, reading comics is like a movie. You're focused on the characters and what the character looks like, what they're acting like, what their emotion is, and that helps you read the text like how they're saying it. So you want the speech bubble to kind of like, you want half of the panel to be the drawing and half of the panel to be the speech bubble, or less than half of the panel to be the speech bubble. So I found these hand-drawn like comic bubbles on the Clip Studio store, and I absolutely love how they look because I used to hand draw my bubbles, and they looked like absolute shit. So I just use these hand-drawn ones. I have to change the settings from when I import them, but that's totally fine. And then I add the text on top, and then I put an arrow kind of aiming towards the character's mouth. I also just use a simple comic font. There's so many fonts that you can choose, but I use this one specifically because I think a lot of webtoons use it, and also it's really easy on my eyes. I find some webtoon kind of fonts to be a little too grainy, a little too much for me, so I think this one's really simple. Also, sound effects. You can find banks of PNG sound effects, so you can just import like a PNG of a sound effect or just like overlay it on your comic, but I personally like to hand draw all my sound effects. I just find it to be easier and it makes the comic more unique and kind of handmade. I like to look at references for what people do for sound effects, so if someone's sad, if someone's mad, if the bell is ringing, if someone's happy. I just like to see what color combinations they use and kind of what effects they use too. And this is not stealing, this is just inspiration. You can look at other comics to get inspiration, see what other people do, don't worry. Making a webcomic is like for fun for me. It's not like a chore, it's not something I want to produce like every week like a job. It's just I want to get my OC's story out there for people to enjoy. So don't lose that feeling. I know webtoon creation can feel like an oiled machine, like you're in a factory and you're like, I have to do the line art, I have to do the background, I have to do the flat colors, I have to shade. It can feel like that, but at the end, when you read the chapter, you're like, whoa, I actually like produced like a story. Because my OC stories have just been in my mind and like there's not really like a set plot, so it's actually really cool to see them like play the plot out. So after the whole panel is done, I upload it to Webtoon under my Webtoon chapter, and then that's it. Basically, I just rinse and repeat, I make more pages, and then that ends up as a chapter. So I hope this video helped you with your Webtoon process and it gives you a step forward to uploading your Webtoon to Webtoon Canvas. So thanks so much for watching. I know this is kind of a fast video, but I wanted to make it digestible and not super long. Like and subscribe. That is very still silly to say. Read my Webtoon on Webtoon Canvas. Chapter 3 is coming soon. It's almost the holidays, so probably not coming soon, but you know. And thank you so much for watching, and have a good one. Bye bye.